What if everything you've been told about discipline is not just wrong, but actually keeping you trapped in cycles of laziness and self-defeat? In the next few minutes, I'm going to share something that might sound impossible at first, but by the end, you'll understand why your laziness might actually be your greatest teacher. Most people think discipline means forcing yourself to do things you don't want to do. They believe it's about willpower, grinding through resistance, and somehow becoming a different person overnight. But here's what nobody tells you. The people who seem naturally disciplined aren't fighting themselves every step of the way. They've discovered something much deeper. They've learned to work with their nature, not against it. They understand that true discipline isn't about conquest, it's about cultivation. And once you see this distinction, everything changes. Your laziness stops being the enemy and becomes the compass pointing toward what actually matters. Stay with me, because this understanding doesn't just transform your productivity, it transforms who you become. Have you noticed how the harder you try to force discipline, the more your laziness seems to fight back? There's something happening beneath the surface that most of us miss because we're focused on the behavior instead of the root. Picture this. It's Monday morning. You've made promises to yourself all weekend. This week will be different. You'll wake up early, exercise, eat healthy, work productively, and finally become the person you know you can be. But by Wednesday, you're back to scrolling your phone, avoiding important tasks, and feeling like you failed again. Here's the thing, you haven't failed. You've just been trying to build discipline like constructing a building without understanding the foundation. Most advice treats discipline like a muscle you can strengthen through punishment and force. But muscles grow through intelligent stress and recovery, not through beating them into submission. The real issue isn't your laziness, it's that you've been taught to see laziness as a character flaw instead of information. Your brain isn't lazy, it's efficient. It's doing exactly what it's designed to do: conserve energy for what it perceives as truly important. When you feel lazy, your system is actually communicating something profound. It's saying, this doesn't align with who you really are, or this approach isn't sustainable, or you're trying to force something that needs to grow naturally. Think about a river that encounters a boulder. It doesn't push harder against the rock. It finds the path of least resistance while still moving toward its destination. Your laziness is like that boulder, not an obstacle to overcome, but information about the most natural path forward. The deeper truth is that most people are exhausted from fighting themselves. They've been told that discipline means willpower, that success requires suffering, that you must force yourself to do things you hate. But what if the opposite were true? What if discipline was actually about aligning with your natural rhythms, working with your energy instead of against it? Here's the compassionate truth. You're not broken. You're not lacking willpower. You're not fundamentally flawed. You're simply trying to use the wrong tools for the job. It's like trying to plant a garden with a hammer. No matter how hard you swing, flowers won't grow. The root cause of chronic laziness isn't character weakness, it's misalignment. When what you're trying to do conflicts with your deeper values, natural rhythms, or authentic self, your system creates resistance. This resistance feels like laziness, but it's actually wisdom in disguise. Your inner nature knows when you're pushing in the wrong direction. It knows when you're trying to force outcomes instead of cultivating them. It knows when you're operating from fear instead of genuine desire, and it responds by withdrawing energy from those activities. Consider how a tree grows. It doesn't force its way through the soil. It follows the natural pull toward light, extending roots toward nourishment, growing in response to its environment. When conditions are right, growth happens effortlessly. When conditions are wrong, the tree conserves energy and waits. Your discipline works the same way. When you're aligned with your authentic direction, when you're working with your natural patterns instead of against them, action becomes natural. The laziness dissolves because there's no longer a war between what you're doing and who you are. But here's the beautiful part. Once you understand this, your laziness becomes your guide. Instead of fighting it, you can listen to it. Instead of seeing it as failure, you can see it as feedback. Your system is trying to tell you something important about your approach, your timing, or your direction. Let me tell you about Maria, a software developer who struggled with what she called chronic laziness for years. Every morning, she'd set ambitious goals, exercise before work, complete 3 major projects, organize her life. Every evening, she'd collapse on the couch, feeling defeated by her inability to follow through. Maria tried everything: morning routines, productivity apps, accountability partners, reward systems. Nothing worked for more than a few days. She was convinced she was fundamentally broken, lacking the discipline gene that successful people seem to have. Then something shifted during a particularly difficult project at work. The deadline was tight, the problem was complex, and Maria found herself naturally staying late, not because she forced herself, but because she was genuinely curious about the solution. She worked for 12 hours straight and felt energized rather than drained. This experience confused her. How could she have such natural focus and energy for work while struggling to maintain discipline in other areas? She began paying attention to the difference between forced effort and natural engagement. She noticed that when she tried to exercise at 5 a.m. because productivity gurus said it was optimal, her body rebelled. But when she went for walks during lunch breaks, she felt naturally energized. When she forced herself to work on projects she thought she should care about, procrastination took over. But when she worked on problems that genuinely intrigued her, time seemed to disappear. Maria began an experiment. Instead of forcing discipline, she started listening to her energy. She tracked when she felt naturally motivated and when she felt resistant. She discovered patterns she'd never noticed before. She was most creative in the late morning, not early dawn. She worked better with music than in silence. She was more productive when she took breaks every hour rather than pushing through. She discovered that her laziness around exercise wasn't laziness at all. She simply hated running but loved dancing. The breakthrough came when Maria realized that discipline wasn't about doing what she was supposed to do. It was about aligning her actions with her authentic energy and natural rhythms. She stopped fighting her nature and started working with it. Within 3 months, Maria had transformed her relationship with productivity. She wasn't forcing herself to do things anymore. She was naturally drawn to actions that aligned with her values and energy patterns. Her colleagues noticed the change. Her work improved dramatically. Most importantly, she felt like herself again. The key insight? Maria's laziness had never been the problem. It was her system's way of protecting her from unsustainable approaches. Once she learned to listen to this wisdom instead of fighting it, discipline became natural. Here's what transforms everything about building discipline. True discipline isn't about forcing yourself to do things you hate. It's about creating conditions where the right actions become inevitable. Most people have this backwards. They think discipline means overpowering resistance through willpower. But willpower is like a muscle that gets exhausted with use. The most disciplined people aren't the ones with the strongest willpower. They're the ones who've learned to work with their natural patterns instead of against them. Think about a master gardener. They don't force plants to grow by pulling on the stems. They create optimal conditions: good soil, proper sunlight, adequate water, and growth happens naturally. The discipline isn't in the forcing, it's in the consistent tending to conditions. Your personal discipline works exactly the same way. When you create the right internal and external conditions, the actions you want to take become the natural choice. When conditions are wrong, even simple tasks require enormous effort. This reveals something profound. Laziness isn't a character flaw, it's information about misalignment. Your system is incredibly intelligent. It knows when you're trying to force outcomes instead of cultivating them. It knows when you're operating from fear instead of genuine desire. And it responds by withdrawing energy from those activities. The people who seem naturally disciplined have learned to recognize this intelligence. They don't fight their energy, they follow it. They don't push through resistance, they investigate what the resistance is trying to tell them. They don't force habits, they cultivate conditions where desired behaviors become natural. Here's the practical truth. Sustainable discipline requires 3 elements that most people ignore. First, alignment with your authentic values and natural rhythms. Second, systems that support your success rather than requiring constant willpower. Third, the patience to let new patterns emerge naturally rather than forcing immediate results. When these elements are in place, what used to require enormous effort becomes effortless. What used to feel like swimming upstream becomes flowing with the current. What used to drain your energy starts to generate it. Consider how a river maintains its discipline. It doesn't force its way to the ocean through sheer willpower. It follows the natural pull of gravity, working with the landscape rather than against it. When it encounters obstacles, it doesn't stop flowing. It finds the path of least resistance while maintaining its essential direction. Your discipline can work the same way. Instead of forcing yourself through obstacles, you can learn to find the natural path toward your goals. Instead of fighting your laziness, you can listen to what it's trying to tell you about your approach. This doesn't mean avoiding all difficulty or only doing what feels good in the moment. It means distinguishing between resistance that indicates misalignment and resistance that indicates growth. It means learning to work with your nature rather than against it. The deeper layer is this. Most people are trying to build discipline on top of a foundation of self-rejection. They're trying to force themselves to become someone different rather than cultivating who they already are. This creates internal conflict that makes every action feel like a battle. True discipline emerges when you stop fighting yourself and start working with yourself. When you align your actions with your values, your energy with your goals, your efforts with your natural rhythms. When this alignment occurs, discipline stops being something you have to do and becomes something you naturally are. Now let's explore the 4 foundations that allow discipline to emerge naturally in your life. These aren't rules to follow, but conditions to cultivate. The first foundation is developing awareness of your natural energy patterns, values, and rhythms. Most people try to build discipline without understanding how their system actually works. It's like trying to drive a car without knowing where the gas pedal is. Start by tracking your energy throughout the day for 1 week. Notice when you feel naturally motivated and when you feel resistant. Don't judge these patterns, just observe them. You might discover that you're most creative in the afternoon, not the morning. You might find that you work better with background music than in silence. You might realize that you're more productive with frequent breaks than long focus sessions. Pay attention to what activities naturally energize you and which ones drain you. This isn't about avoiding all difficult tasks, but about understanding your authentic preferences and working with them rather than against them. Notice the difference between resistance that indicates misalignment and resistance that indicates growth. Misalignment resistance feels heavy, conflicted, and exhausting. Growth resistance feels challenging but energizing, like stretching a muscle. Develop the ability to recognize when you're operating from fear versus genuine desire. Fear-based actions feel forced and unsustainable. Desire-based actions feel natural and energizing, even when they're challenging. Create regular check-ins with yourself. Ask, what is my energy telling me right now? What approach would feel most natural? What would I do if I trusted my instincts? This isn't about being self-indulgent or avoiding difficulty. It's about developing the wisdom to distinguish between productive effort and wasteful struggle. When you understand your natural patterns, you can work with them rather than against them. The second foundation is aligning your actions with your authentic values and natural strengths. Most people try to build discipline around actions that conflict with who they really are. This creates constant internal friction that makes every task feel like a battle. Start by identifying your core values, not what you think you should value, but what you actually care about deeply. Then examine your current goals and habits. Are they aligned with these values? If not, either adjust your goals or find ways to connect them to what you genuinely care about. For example, if you value creativity but you're trying to force yourself into a rigid productivity system, you'll constantly feel resistant. Instead, find ways to bring creativity into your productivity approach. Use colorful planning tools, work in inspiring environments, or alternate between different types of tasks. Look for the natural connection between what you want to achieve and who you authentically are. If you want to exercise but hate going to the gym, explore movement that feels natural to you. If you want to eat healthier but hate restrictive diets, find ways to make healthy eating feel abundant and pleasurable. The key is to stop trying to force yourself into someone else's version of discipline and start discovering your own unique approach. What works for others might not work for you, and that's perfectly fine. Focus on actions that feel like natural extensions of who you are rather than violations of your nature. When there's alignment between your actions and your authentic self, discipline becomes effortless because you're not fighting internal resistance. This doesn't mean everything will always feel easy, but it means the difficulty will feel productive rather than destructive. You'll be stretching yourself rather than breaking yourself. The third foundation is understanding that sustainable discipline develops gradually through patience cultivation, not through forcing immediate results. Most people abandon their efforts too quickly because they expect overnight transformation. Think of discipline like growing a garden. You don't plant seeds and expect flowers the next day. You create conditions, tend to the soil, provide consistent care, and trust the natural process of growth. Some days there's visible progress, other days the work happens beneath the surface. Start with actions so small they feel almost ridiculously easy. If you want to exercise, start with putting on your workout clothes. If you want to write, start with opening a document. If you want to eat healthier, start with drinking 1 glass of water in the morning. The goal isn't to accomplish something significantly immediately. It's to build the neural pathways that make desired actions feel natural. Your brain learns through repetition, not through intensity. Celebrate small wins consistently. Your brain responds to positive reinforcement much better than criticism. When you acknowledge progress, even tiny progress, you're training your system to associate these actions with good feelings. Expect setbacks and plan for them. Discipline isn't a straight line, it's a gradual upward spiral. There will be days when you don't follow through, and that's completely normal. The key is to get back on track quickly without self-judgment. Focus on consistency over perfection. It's better to do something small every day than something big once a week. The daily repetition builds the neural pathways that make discipline feel natural. Trust the process of gradual emergence. Often, the most significant changes happen so gradually that you don't notice them day to day. But if you compare yourself to who you were 3 months ago, the transformation can be dramatic. The fourth foundation is allowing your discipline to express itself in ways that feel natural and authentic to you. Most people try to copy someone else's approach rather than discovering their own unique style. Recognize that there's no single right way to be disciplined. Some people work best with detailed schedules, others with loose frameworks. Some thrive with accountability partners, others work better alone. Some need variety, others prefer routine. Experiment with different approaches until you find what feels natural for you. Try working in different environments, at different times, with different tools and systems. Pay attention to what makes you feel energized versus what makes you feel drained. Allow your discipline to evolve over time. What works for you now might not work in 6 months, and that's perfectly fine. Stay flexible and willing to adjust your approach as you grow and change. Focus on progress, not perfection. The goal isn't to become a disciplined machine, it's to become someone who naturally takes actions aligned with their values and goals. This looks different for everyone. Remember that sustainable discipline feels good. If your approach consistently leaves you feeling exhausted, resentful, or burned out, it's not working. True discipline should feel like coming home to yourself, not like fighting against yourself. Trust your instincts about what feels right for you. Your inner wisdom knows better than any external system what approach will work long term. The key is to listen to this wisdom rather than dismissing it. When you build discipline on these 4 foundations, inner awareness, aligned action, patient cultivation, and natural expression, something beautiful happens. What used to require enormous willpower becomes effortless. What used to feel like swimming upstream becomes flowing with the current. You stop being someone who struggles with discipline and become someone who naturally lives in alignment with their values and goals. This isn't about becoming perfect, it's about becoming authentic. And when you're authentic, discipline becomes a natural expression of who you are rather than something you have to force yourself to do. Now let's translate these foundations into practical steps you can begin implementing immediately. Remember, the goal isn't to do everything at once, but to start where you are and build gradually. Spend the first week simply observing your natural patterns without trying to change anything. This awareness phase is crucial because most people try to build discipline without understanding how their system actually works. Each day, notice when you feel naturally energized and when you feel sluggish. Track this in a simple journal or phone app. Note the time, what you are doing, and your energy level on a scale of 1 to 10. Pay attention to what activities naturally draw you in and which ones you avoid. Don't judge these patterns, just observe them. You might discover that you're most creative in the late morning, most social in the afternoon, and most reflective in the evening. Notice the difference between healthy tiredness and depleted exhaustion. Healthy tiredness comes from engaging in meaningful activities. Depleted exhaustion comes from fighting against your natural rhythms or doing things that don't align with your values. Observe how different environments affect your energy. Do you work better with background noise or silence, bright lights or dim lighting, alone or with others nearby? These preferences aren't arbitrary, they're information about how to set yourself up for success. In the second week, examine the relationship between your current goals and your authentic values. Most people struggle with discipline because they're trying to force themselves to do things that don't genuinely matter to them. Make a list of your core values, not what you think you should value, but what you actually care about deeply. Consider what makes you feel most alive, what you naturally gravitate toward, and what you'd fight to protect. Look at your current goals and habits. For each one, ask, how does this connect to what I really care about? If you can't find the connection, either adjust the goal or find a way to make it meaningful. For example, if you value creativity, but you're trying to force yourself into a rigid exercise routine, explore ways to make movement more creative. Try dance, martial arts, hiking in beautiful places, or sports that require strategy and improvisation. If you value connection, but you're trying to force yourself to work in isolation, find ways to bring social elements into your productivity. Work in coffee shops, join co-working spaces, or set up regular check-ins with friends about your goals. The key is to stop trying to force yourself into someone else's version of success and start discovering your own unique path. In the third week, begin implementing tiny habits that align with your values and natural rhythms. The goal is to make these habits so small that they feel almost ridiculously easy. Choose one area where you want to build discipline. Start with something that connects to your core values and fits naturally into your existing routine. Make the habit so small that you can't fail. If you want to exercise, start with putting on your workout clothes. If you want to write, start with opening a document. If you want to eat healthier, start with drinking 1 glass of water in the morning. The key is consistency, not intensity. It's better to do something tiny every day than something big once a week. Your brain learns through repetition, and these small actions build the neural pathways that make larger changes feel natural. After you've done the micro habit for a week, you can gradually expand it, but only increase the difficulty when the current level feels completely natural and automatic. In the fourth week, focus on creating systems that support your success rather than requiring constant willpower. Most people try to rely on motivation, but motivation is unreliable. Systems are what create sustainable discipline. Design your environment to make desired behaviors easier and undesired behaviors more difficult. If you want to read more, put books in visible places and move your phone to another room. If you want to eat healthier, prep healthy snacks and remove junk food from easy reach. Create simple routines that bundle desired behaviors with things you already do naturally. For example, if you want to practice gratitude, do it right after your morning coffee. If you want to exercise, do it right after you get home from work. Set up positive feedback loops that reinforce your progress. This might mean tracking your habits visually, celebrating small wins, or sharing your progress with supportive friends. Lay out as much friction as possible from desired behaviors. Lay out your workout clothes the night before. Prepare healthy meals in advance. Set up your workspace so you can start immediately. The goal is to create conditions where the right choices become the natural choices. When your environment supports your success, discipline becomes effortless. After the initial 4 weeks, continue refining your approach based on what you've learned. Remember that building sustainable discipline is an ongoing process, not a destination. Regular check-ins with yourself are essential. Ask, what's working well? What feels forced or unsustainable? How can I adjust my approach to feel more natural? Stay flexible and willing to experiment. What works for you now might not work in 6 months, and that's perfectly fine. The key is to keep listening to your inner wisdom and adjusting your approach accordingly. Focus on progress, not perfection. There will be days when you don't follow through, and that's completely normal. The key is to get back on track quickly without self-judgment. Trust the process of gradual emergence. Often, the most significant changes happen so gradually that you don't notice them day to day. But if you compare yourself to who you were 3 months ago, the transformation can be dramatic. Remember that sustainable discipline should feel good. If your approach consistently leaves you feeling exhausted, resentful, or burned out, it's not working. True discipline should feel like coming home to yourself, not like fighting against yourself. The journey from laziness to discipline isn't about becoming a different person. It's about discovering who you already are beneath the layers of forced effort and self-criticism. It's about learning to work with your nature rather than against it. Your laziness isn't a character flaw, it's information. It's your system's way of telling you that something isn't aligned, that you're trying to force outcomes instead of cultivating them, that you're operating from fear instead of genuine desire. When you learn to listen to this information instead of fighting it, everything changes. What used to require enormous willpower becomes effortless. What used to feel like swimming upstream becomes flowing with the current. What used to drain your energy starts to generate it. True discipline isn't about conquest, it's about cultivation. It's about creating conditions where the right actions become inevitable. It's about aligning your efforts with your values, your energy with your goals, your actions with your authentic self. This doesn't mean avoiding all difficulty or only doing what feels good in the moment. It means learning to distinguish between productive effort and wasteful struggle. It means understanding that the most sustainable path is often the one that feels most natural. The 4 foundations we've explored, inner awareness, aligned action, patient cultivation, and natural expression, provide the framework for this transformation. But remember, these aren't rules to follow rigidly. They're principles to adapt to your unique situation and personality. Building discipline this way takes patience. It requires trusting a process that unfolds gradually rather than forcing immediate results. But the discipline you build this way is sustainable because it's rooted in who you actually are rather than who you think you should be. As you begin this journey, remember that every small step matters. Every moment of awareness, every aligned action, every patient day of cultivation is building the foundation for lasting change. You're not just building discipline, you're discovering your authentic power. The person you're becoming through this process isn't someone who has to force themselves to do the right things. It's someone who naturally gravitates toward actions that align with their values and goals. Someone who has learned to work with their energy rather than against it. Someone who trusts their inner wisdom and follows their authentic path. This is the true gift of understanding discipline differently. It's not just about being more productive or achieving more goals. It's about coming home to yourself, about living in alignment with who you really are, about discovering the effortless power that emerges when you stop fighting yourself and start working with yourself. Your laziness has been trying to teach you this all along. Now you're ready to listen.